Let's find out from our political panel how they think the candidates did in this first debate. Joining us this afternoon, Adrienne Batra, the editor-in-chief at the Toronto Sun, Alvin Tedjo, who's the former Liberal leadership candidate, Tom Parkin with the NDP, or an NDP commentator, and we're also hoping to connect with Joanne Roberts, who's the president of the Heartwood Institute, in this conversation as well. Thanks to the three of you for joining us this afternoon. Great to have you on. Adrienne, I'll start with you. Was there a clear winner in this debate? That always seems like the go-to question when these things wrap up.
The format was the clear winner in this debate, actually. I think that normally when you have us on a post-debate analysis, it's one of those sorts of conversations where nothing of substance is really discussed because they're just getting in jabs, which happened in this instance. But because the format was such as it was laid out, there was an actual opportunity for all four of the party leaders to put forward what they believe is the best for the future of Ontario. So I think that was very beneficial. I think that each of the party leaders, I'll start with Premier Ford, I think that he, usually the other three will attack the front runner or the current leader. He was able to deflect much of that. So from that perspective, they would look at that as this conversation as a success. Mike Schreiner is always very effective. He's very thoughtful. Andrea Horwath has, been doing this for some time. Her ability to debate is very proven in these sorts of types of conversations. And for Mr. Del Duca, well, he's, reintroducing himself to Ontarians. So from all, there was no obvious front runner, but from Premier Ford's perspective, I think his team's perspective, the fact that he was able to hold out and hold his own and get some of his messaging across was a success.
Okay, Alvin, I want to ask about the Liberal leader. This was an opportunity for him in terms of a reintroduction and in terms of his performance alongside Doug Ford, Andrea Horwath, and of course Mike Schreiner as well. As a former Liberal leadership candidate, how do you think the leader of the party did?
I think Stephen did really well. I mean, he was calm, he was collected, he was thoughtful. He put forward a number of policy ideas that have been interesting and gathering and getting attention of the public at large. And that's what you want to do during elections, especially when you're trying to introduce yourself. I'm going to disagree a little bit with Adrienne because I think that Premier Ford has been hiding a little bit. He only has one appearance a day. He takes very few questions from the media. He skipped a number of debates, including the Black issues debate, including the women's issues debate. So this is the first time that electors are really getting a chance to see him. And I don't know that he really answered a lot of the questions. I mean, he's deflecting, so he's becoming a better politician, like he decries all the time. But I don't think he did a particularly good job with that. And in terms of Andrea Horwath's performance, she's been leader this is her fourth election now. It still sounds like she's running for leader of the opposition. I didn't really get anything from her, especially considering how much experience she has.
Okay, Tom, we'll get you to respond to that. How do you think Andrea Horwath, did she, the NDP, they have a base in Northern Ontario. Was she able to sort of capitalize on that, build on that perhaps in this debate?
Yeah, I think what Andrea can do is she understands the experience of living in Northern Ontario better than anybody else on that stage. It's about the weather, it's about the distances, it's about the lack of services. That is, my parents-in-law live in Northern Ontario, and I can tell you they're older and they need health services, and we have to go up there and help them do that. It's an incredible burden, and Andrea understands this. She intuitively gets it that it's not fair that different parts of the province have different levels of service. So I think that just shines through. As for who won the debate, I mean, I don't know. I think we'll leave that for others. But I think she got off the best line of the day when she pointed out that, Mr. Del Duca, he goes on and on about how, we shouldn't be looking in the rearview mirror and checking out the Liberal record for back and win and the gas plants and his $100 million GO Transit fiasco. And he doesn't want us to look in the rearview mirror because he doesn't want us to see the wreck that's back there. I thought that was a pretty clever line, and she got it off, and it just speaks to the point that the other two on the stage really, well, they were kind of trying to both pretend that they'd never been the leaders of this province, so that, what kind of wasn't me, it was somebody else, and we're going to get that done this time. And Andrea kind of, I think, blew through that. It's like, let's start being accountable and getting this, stop making excuses, fix what's been broken, and she's the one to do that.
Joanne, Robert, we welcome you to the discussion as well. The president of the Heartwood Institute, also an Ontario Green Party strategist. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Do you have a take on maybe who has walked away as a clear winner, or at least resonating with voters as a result of this debate?
Well, I think that certainly Ontarians in the crowd here today saw Mike Schreiner, that he can hold his own with the other three. So it was encouraging to see Mike do that. I thought it was interesting what Tom said. You know, you had Andrea and the other two. I think what came out of this, and I know this sounds like, you know, I'm just tooting his horn, but Mike really provided the alternative to the other two, even more so than Andrea. Although I've got to say, her best moment was when, you know, really, Doug Ford was bullying her. She turned around on him and basically put the buddy line back to him. And to be honest, that was a shining moment for her. But I thought she was a little slow. For someone who has done this so many times, her beginnings were a bit plodding, and she didn't get to her point as quickly as she could have. But yeah, I think as for winners, I think Greens won because they were in the debate. But I think it was kind of what was to be expected.
Adrienne, I want to ask about the issues and what we heard from the candidates in terms of, you know, again, resonating with voters. What was at stake, or what is at stake in terms of the Northern Ontario vote? Who has the most to gain by resonating with voters in Northern Ontario?
Well, if we look at what we consider in terms of the northern ridings, there's 13 of them. The Conservatives hold 3 of them. And it's then the rest is sprinkled between Liberals and the NDP. But, you know, if you go back and ask Liberal strategists from 15, 20 years ago if the Conservatives would ever be competitive in the North, the answer would be a resounding no. It's always a split between the Liberals and the NDP. But the fact that the Tories are competitive and are looking at some of the seats, they have arguably the most to gain in that regard. And I think by focusing specifically on certain elements that Premier Ford talked about, the minerals, the development, the highway, the infrastructure, those are all aimed at getting those votes and getting the attention to the Tory party that normally hasn't had a lot of focus in this part of the province. So that's an interesting part. The most interesting exchange, I think, is encompassing that, and that had to do with the infrastructure and the roads and the development of the highways. Premier Ford went after Mr. Del Duca pretty hard. And I think scored a couple of valid arguments. And then, of course, Ms. Horvath came in and propped up Ford's argument. So that was not an easy one for Mr. Del Duca in terms of the fact that he used to be infrastructure minister.
Adrienne?
But I think that there is, yeah.